So my point is this. If I was to go and meet you and I said, hey, how are you doing? I give you a nice hearty handshake. And then I give you a, wonderful little dessert. It was a brownie, and you took a bite of it. One of the most, delicious chocolate brownies you've ever had in your life. And it was a nice moment, for 5 minutes. And then I just started stabbing the shit out of you. I just started 50, to 100 times, just all over your body, just started stabbing you everywhere. Now, later on, when I go to relate that story to you, and the only thing I mention is like, hey, remember that one time when I said hi to you and I give you that real nice hearty handshake? Remember I was nice and firm and we had like a good little bond there. I give you that hearty handshake and I asked you how you were doing and I can't remember, that was, let's see, hearty handshake, I asked you how you were doing and anyways, then remember that day? There's something else. You forgot the biggest fucking part. Last time you saw me, you stabbed me 50 goddamn times. You stabbed me 100 fucking times after you give me a brownie, right? There, maybe that was the thing. Yeah, that's right, the brownie. Yeah, remember when I said hi, that hearty handshake, and give you that brownie? Remember? Yeah, remember, then you stabbed me 100 fucking times. So, well, you gotta take the goods with the bads. No, that's not how we're gonna fucking play this. Why did you give me a brownie? Why were you nice to me? Why'd you stab me 100 times? None of this fucking makes any goddamn sense. The first trading partners of the New Netherlanders were the Algonquin who lived in the area. The Dutch depended on the indigenous population to capture skin and deliver pelts to them, especially beaver. The New Netherlanders. The Dutch. And sometimes I think that some nations exist because they have such an easy, the Dutch. So the Dutch, of course, they couldn't get beaver on their own, so they needed to outsource the beaver collecting, the collecting of beaver pelts. So the Dutch wanted a piece of America. In 1628, the Mohawks, who are members of the Iroquois Confederacy, one of the original 5-nation member of the Iroquois Confederacy, which is what our federal government is based upon. 5 individual tribes, but 1 Iroquois Confederacy. The Mohawks conquered the Mohicans in 1628, and the Mohicans retreated to Connecticut. The Mohicans, the Pequot, the Uncas people, the Tatagoms people. So the Mohawks gained a near monopoly in the fur trade with the Dutch. So the Mohawks were dominating in the beaver trade in the 1600s. The Mohawks, the Iroquois. And so the Algonquin nations, your Lenape and your Pequot and your Shawnee, they had to trade with the Dutch and the English in the shadows. So the Mohawks controlled the upstate Adirondacks and Mohawk Valley through the center of New York. So the Mohawks controlled most of New York. And because of the Mohawk and the Dutch trade, that made the Mohawks and the Dutch very wealthy, very rich. The Mohawks got gunpowder and guns and weapons, English goods, and the Dutch got a shit ton of beaver pelts. Because the reason why beaver was so important was because the Dutch and the English were mostly here as a commercial venture. So the Dutch West Indies, the Dutch East Indies Company. It's a corporation. They want to make money. And instead of seeing the land would be valuable, in the future, there's a big story about the Dutch buying Manhattan for $24, but then the Dutch would lose Manhattan. So that's supposed to mock the Native Americans, but the Dutch wasted $24 for nothing. Because the Dutch wasn't interested in cultivating and farming and setting up a civilization, establishing post offices and sewages and plumbing and internet and streets and courthouse and what have you. The Dutch wanted fucking money. They wanted cash. And so while timber and land, you know, they got some cash, some money, they wanted that quick money, that crack money, that quick, simple buck, you know, just get it. So the beavers, getting the fucking pelts, beaver pelts, and I guess buffalo and deer and other things such as beaver. Is that what you're eating today? You guys eating a bunch of beaver? Because there's a lot of beaver killing in the 1600s. So if we're just going to assume since there was turkeys, so there must have been turkeys at the damn 1621 feast. Well, there's beavers too, and buffalo. And there was that other feast that had alligators. Are you eating alligators? Make sure you're eating your oysters and your clams and grapes. There was grapes and pecans, which is indigenous to this continent. Really, we should be planting pecan trees. We should be planting crab apple trees and chocolate trees, cocoa trees, and cocoa, vanilla beans, vanilla trees, vanilla flowers, passion fruit, chia, tomatoes, potatoes, corn, shit that was indigenous to this continent. Because the Native Americans had more cooler shit, and they had more advanced agricultural techniques. So it almost seems like there was a farming revolution, right, in the Sumerian and all the cradle of civilization, the Mediterranean. There was a farming revolution that happened here in the Americas before the European invasion. So essentially I'm going to stick with the Mystic River Massacre. There was Thanksgiving was declared after the Pequot were wiped out. So thank God we wiped out all those children who were sleeping in their beds. So that's what you're celebrating today. When you take a bite of turkey, just know you're not just taking a bite of lies and genocide. You're definitely doing that, right? So, but in addition to also, you're perpetuating another fucking genocide. Every goddamn year, there's a genocide to commemorate the genocide. And people say, well, this is one good moment. Yeah, it was, but there's no fucking turkey, so there's a lie for you. And it wasn't a Thanksgiving. There's lie number 2. So that 1621 feast, it was Chief Massasoit was shaking down William Bradford. 90 Wampanoag just descended upon the English as they were firing their guns off. And so essentially this is the Wampanoag being like, hey, we can be cool or we can't. So you want to be cool? And the Pilgrim said, all right, we'll be cool. And so now I got your back, you got my back. And there was a political and military alliance. And then after the English agreed to it, essentially they got to keep the land. They stole Patuxent lands. Squanto's people's lands was the Patuxents, and that was his ancestral people's land. So essentially Squanto's, he was the last of the Patuxent. But William Bradford and company, they didn't care. And actually they were horrible at surviving. Didn't like a third of them survive. In Jamestown, they were cannibalizing each other. They didn't even have knives. So this is like, the only fancy thing about them was their clothes, right? They dressed real fucking nice, but then they would shit in a bucket, and then they would have to, pile all that bucket shit up in a big hole just outside of town, I think, unless they kept it in their houses, which that, of course, would, cause cholera and shit, so maybe that's why they were dying, because they were literally living in their own shit. And pigs do get comfortable in their own shit. That is absolutely true, so there's a little pearl of wisdom from Kenny O'Neill. Daggone it, that doggone And you know what? Even a pig gets comfortable in slop or in mud. That's what he said. But they get comfortable in their own shit. So the Fort Good Hope was established in Hartford, Connecticut. Fort Good Hope is a Dutch fort, and it was established June 8, 1633. That was the Dutch West India Company, WIC, but it's the West India Company, Dutch Company, Corporation. And so of the United Netherlands Dutch Republic, so it's a multinational corporation that has, the strength of the fucking state behind it? Wait a second. It's almost like an invasion now, isn't it? And if you look at war, we were afraid of Russia getting a foothold in Cuba. That's it, because we thought that if they get one little base, one little embassy, one little foothold in Cuba, we're done for. It's over. And in the nuclear age, there's some truth to that. So the Dutch were here. They had a foothold, but eventually the English is going to wipe them out, and New Netherland is going to turn into New York, I want to say. I'm pretty sure that's true. So the Dutch established New Netherland colony, and then there was Fort Good Hope. Fort Good Hope is in Connecticut. So they established several forts, and one of them was in Connecticut. It was on the south bank of the Little River, now Park River, and it was a tributary river of the Fresh River, which is now the Connecticut River. So the Pequot River, Little River, the Fresh River, but now it's Park River, Connecticut River, and the Mystic River? No. What was the Pequot? Oh, was it Mystic? I don't know. So, yeah. One of these rivers was the Pequot River. I want to say it's Mystic. But the WIC had planned Fort Good Hope to be the northeastern fortification and a trading center of the WIC. The land was part of a larger tract purchase on June 8th, 1633 by Jacob Van Curler on behalf of the WIC from the Sequins, one of the clans of the Connecticut Indians. One good thing about the Dutch is they would actually pay for their land. They would pay some of the local Indians, and there was miscommunication. They, I don't know, probably thought they were just accepting gifts, and I don't know if they signed their names or not. I mean, that is a contract, but I guess because they were living there. Jacob Van Curler adopted a blockhouse and palisade to the post, while New Amsterdam sent a small garrison and a pair of cannons to Fort Good Hope. And this was established 1633. This is important because it's a weird coincidence that the Dutch is going to establish a fort here in the middle, right, of Park River, Connecticut River, and right around where they established this fort, we're going to see lots of massacres. Chief Tattebim of the Pequot is going to get killed by the Dutch, and then John Stone is going to get killed by the Western Neantics. John Oldham is going to get killed by the Narragansett, but they're all going to blame the Pequot, and the Pequot wasn't responsible for any of them. The Pequot were just hated because they were the main favored trading partners with the English, I guess, or the Dutch. No, it was the Dutch. The Pequot was trading a lot with the Dutch. So you had the Mohawks, who would trade with the Dutch, and you had the Pequot, who were the main Algonquins, who were trading with the Dutch. And so, let's see, 1633, they sheltered a number of people, including women and children. They said about 30 souls. 30 souls, right? Because if you're a white person, you're a soul. You're an individual. Like, you're not just a human, you're a soul. But if you're the Native Americans, you just get wiped out and you're just a number. And then there was 25 acres around this. And so this is just like Atticus and Athens. So the city of Athens, and then you got Atticus around it. So they had the Fort Good Hope. It's also the House of Hope. There's other names for it. But it's a trading post for the Dutch colony of New Netherland in the 1600s. So it's a Dutch trading post. Fort Good Hope is. And there was 30 people in it, and they had 25 acres surrounding it, a cultivated farm and garden of 25 acres. So the Jacob Van Curler, he's the commissary of the post, acting under the command of Wouter Van Twinner, director or governor of the New Netherlands, bought of the Pequot Indians certain lands described as a flat called Suckiage, or Black Earth, 1 league down from the river, 1/3 of a league wide to the highland, and beyond the hill upwards extending to a little stream. The price paid was 1 piece of duffel, 27 ells long, 6 axes, 6 kettles, 18 knives, 1 sword blade, 1 pair of shears, some toys, and a musket. The land must have covered most of the present city of Hartford. It will be noticed that the title of the Dutch by discovery and purchase was as good as that of the English. You had Hudson. Hudson went up to Hudson Bay and said it was for the Dutch. And there was a king that said all of America was for the English. So the Dutch actually had a greater claim to New York, or some of these places near Connecticut, New York, and that river. So the English and the Dutch essentially had the same claim. We discovered it, we paid for it, we bought it. but the English actually didn't pay for shit. So, and another thing that they point out that the Dutch's weakness was that they didn't raise any crops. So when it came time to who owns this land, well, you didn't cultivate any of your land. Well, because they weren't there to colonize. They weren't there to create a civilization or to establish government for, millions of people to live there after. What they wanted was a bunch of furs, a bunch of beaver pelts and white-tailed deer pelts, buffalo pelts, just furs of all kinds. Kill me whatever fucking creatures you can and give me their skins. And give me their fur, give me their skins. It can be turned into leather. So it's just kind of crazy how it's just a big, just a turkey shoot. Just a turkey shoot. Just throw a bunch of turkeys out there, and turkeys, they're not running anywhere. They're not going to go anywhere. So what? Who gives a shit about any of this, right? So 1633 is 4 years before the Mystic River Massacre, and it's 12 years after that first feast, which isn't a Thanksgiving. The first Thanksgiving that William Bradford declared was 1623. And so that's one Thanksgiving. There are several declarations of Thanksgivings beforehand, 1541, 1564, and 1565, and two in Florida, one in Texas. So there's greater claims for an earlier American Thanksgiving, an official celebration of Thanksgiving. So this wasn't a Thanksgiving. This is the imagery. This is the picturesque imagery that we use with Pilgrims and Native Americans. This is the feast. Sarah Josepha Hale jumped on Abraham Lincoln's declaration, and so she'd been writing this women's magazine. And so when Abraham Lincoln finally declared a day of Thanksgiving, as she had petitioned 12 fucking presidents or something crazy like that, eventually Abraham Lincoln declares a day of Thanksgiving, and the imagery, the story that is used is this 1621 feast between Massasoit and William Bradford. So let's use some analogies. What's right, what's wrong? So do unto others, right? An eye for an eye. So that's fair, that's logical. It seems very balanced to me. So what's going on here? We have a moment that was a good thing. So let's take a second and say, good for the Chief Massasoit, good for the 90 Pokanoket and Wampanoags, good for Abraham Lincoln, good for Sarah Josepha Hale, who essentially they're just trying to bring the country together, and she saw this one good moment between the Pilgrims and the Indians and really enjoyed it and expanded it, blew it up. And so now today it's about family and abundance and having lots of food, but there's that religious connotation that's put on it. And when we're thinking about the Native American history, we're not even, it's a whitewash. It's a moment that basically forgives us of our sins. Okay, so for the main example, so William Bradford, he's, of the Plymouth colony. And William Bradford actually is a Puritan, and he believes in this religion thing. So it's not just about the money for him, but over half of the people that lived in his colony was there just for the money. And when it was profitable, that's when, when money started coming into it, that's when the standard of living started to rise. Half the fucking people died the first winter. They all starved and froze to death. So they were fucked, right? 1620 got there, half of them fucking died and starved to death. And then 1621, there was this meeting, and the way that Massasoit, since it's a shakedown, but let's give everybody the benefit of the doubt. So the English is just firing off their guns. They went, fouling, shot some fucking ducks and shit, and then they were just practicing shooting. And while they were practicing shooting, and that seems so benign, right? We were out practicing our arms. Where you shooting at some fucking shit? So, Chief Massasoit comes up with 90 Wampanoag warriors. And the English are just, spellbound, dumbfounded. What's this about? So, they talk to the person, they're friendly. But essentially, it's a political and military alliance. Like, you're here and we're here. We don't know who you are. We'll let you stay on this land, but you're going to have our back and we have your back. And so, good, they eventually started out, you know, the Wampanoag kind of descended upon them. The Pilgrims didn't have the fucking food. They, you know, had some shit, but their pea crop, right, their pea crop was, half the people were dying. So they didn't have a good pea crop, and so once they agreed to a political and military alliance, we'll be friends, your enemies are my enemies, and then they could do as the hell as they want to. So that give the Pilgrims that land. The Patuxent lands were the Pilgrims, they got to stay there, and then the Native Americans and the Pilgrims were going to be best fucking buddies. Oh, that's nice. That's a nice little fucking story. Nice 3 days. There was wrestling, there was games. So, you know, let's give some accolades where accolades is due. It's a nice little moment. It's not Thanksgiving. They didn't say it was a big Christian Thanksgiving thing. It was a fall celebration and, you know, celebration of a new political military alliance. So, you know, our two tribes are now united as one. And then the Wampanoag goes and gets the food. So the Pilgrims didn't even have any goddamn food. They didn't even offer any of the food to the people. They're shitty peas, right? They had a crop of peas that was real crap. And so the only one historical document that's listed says that there was waterfowl, ducks and geese, and white-tailed deer, 5 white-tailed deer, which the Wampanoag went and got, and grain and Indian corn. And that's it. So corn can be made into that hominy, and then that's a batter. It could be bread. You know, there could be some other stuff. The barley, grain, barley, wheat, I don't know, it could be either wheat or barley. And then the waterfowl, I think it might be fowl. Oh, that's a turkey. Turkeys are fowl. But when they go fowling, they're shooting ducks and geese. So the point that I'm making is the history of whites and Native Americans. 10 to 100 million fucking Native Americans were genocided off this planet because of just systemic, George Washington, Christopher Columbus, just systemic, just kind of, there's this conflict, that conflict, oh, you know, now they're all fucking gone. So Native Americans were here in America for 14,000 years, and they're everywhere. They're plentiful as the buffalo and the bison and the beaver, and, you know, as all the berries and all the whatever, you know, succotash, maple trees. So this cornucopia, this Garden of Eden, right? For 14,000 years, Native Americans lived on this soil, and now they're gone. They were everywhere, now they're nowhere. So what happened? Okay, so I know you're familiar with the story, but on Thanksgiving, we should talk about Native American. We should have Thanksgiving stories. We should have Native American stories. We should plant pumpkins and tomatoes and potatoes and vanilla and chocolate and passion fruit and try to regenerate that which we destroyed. I was thinking the native indigenous plants we should eat, but that's still genocide. And think about this. So it's a moment, Thanksgiving to me is just a whitewashed moment that covers the entire genocide as if it didn't fucking happen. It did happen. It's bullshit. And, you know, there could be an argument that the reservations, they get acres of land there. So if it was evenly distributed, every, you know, Native Americans that survived. And there were some Pequot that survived. And so in a way, some of the, you know, good stories of where they succeeded was the people that give in. So it was like the Uncas, but those were the kiss asses. So if you take a step back and you see that white people come into America and kill all the red people, all the Native Americans are fucking dead. If you see that, you know, over several hundred years as a historical fact, then the Native Americans in the beginning that was fighting, no matter how barbaric, no matter how insane, no matter how fucking Nat Turner they were being, they're totally justified. Because look at what's going to happen to all the Native Americans. The ones that fought back were the ones in the right, historically. Even if they were complete savages, even if they killed in cold blood, which some did, but so did the Pilgrims. So I think it's important to understand history and to understand the facts and to understand what this day actually is. So this day is that military and political alliance between Chief Massasoit and William Bradford and the Pilgrims. So the Wampanoags, the Plymouth colony, was now going to be one military political unit. You scratch my back, I scratch yours. And now they're going to be best buddies. So fucking wonderful, fucking great. fast forward 50 years, and the Wampanoag, the sons, so Bradford dies, Massasoit dies, then the other one is Wittawament is poisoned, so the first fucking successor is killed. And if you just look at the Native American history, essentially they're just being Tatabim. Tatabim, he just went on to a Dutch trading vessel, and the Dutch Jacques Ellikens just kills him straight up. Fucking says, "Oh, give me a ransom." They give him a bunch of wampum, which was supposed to be for currency. He accepts the wampum, kills Tatabim anyways. So what the fuck is this shit? He assassinated the leader of the Pequot. The Dutch did, in 1634. So what happens in 1637, 3 years later? The Pequot, the Dutch, a lot of the same fucking actors. And so to say that this major murder, this assassination of the leader of the Pequot has nothing to do with the Mystic River Massacre, that's bullshit. That's bullshit. They just set up the fucking Fort of Good Hope, 1633, and then the next year they're often fucking Pequot chiefs. So Tatabim was a Pequot chief, and then once he gets killed, Sassacus is the successor of Tatabim. And Uncas, though, the killing of Tatabim splits the Pequot into the Mohegans and the Pequot. So before, when they were sitting there saying that the Mohawks conquered the Mohicans and they retreated to Connecticut, that was in 1628. So I'm thinking that the Pequot and the Mohicans are one and the same up until 1634. 1634 is when you're going to have the schism, and then there's going to be a full-on split because the Mystic River Massacre has Uncas and the Narragansett and the Eastern Ninigret, the Eastern Neantics, all allying with the Massachusetts Bay Colony and Connecticut Colony, but not the Plymouth Colony. I'm not for sure about Plymouth Colony. And also not for sure about the Mystic River Native Americans could have been Christian. They were saying they were praying Indians. So were the Pequot praying Indians? I mean, the Pequot were the Dutch's favored nation in the Algonquins. Amongst the Algonquins, it was the Pequot that they mostly traded with. So just like the Mohawks in upper state New York, the Algonquin was the Pequot, sort of counterpart. So Thanksgiving doesn't tell the whole story. Thanksgiving doesn't even, when you take a bite of Thanksgiving, when you take a bite of that turkey, take a bite of Native Americans. You're eating actual Native American people. Because to celebrate this whitewashed genocide, we have to genocide an entire shit ton of millions of birds, millions of turkeys have to fucking die so y'all can pretend that you're for family and religion and whatever fucking bullshit it's the food. So to have a holiday with a bunch of fucking food, okay, I get that. Every day, no day is more special than any other day. And to have an overwhelming amount of food, that's good. That's a good, any day. Pick any fucking day. Let's have every goddamn day, the last day of every month, let's just have just a cornucopia, overwhelming abundance where we just eat shit tons of fucking food and we never stop, okay? At the end of every goddamn month, call it whatever you want, that's Thanksgiving. Let's all just give thanks and praise and be with family and love and whatever the fuck you think Thanksgiving means, and you keep this shit going and the traditions going. Do that at the end of every goddamn month. Because every day is special. Every day of life is special. One day is not more important than the others. Just a real quick general question about the city turnout rate. Do you know where I could find the turnout rate for the November 7th election?
What do you mean there?
The percentage, I wanted the overall for the county, but also for the city specifically. I don't know if you could get the specific city turnout rate, but the percentage, the total registered voters for the county and the city, and then the percentage of voters for each.
Hold on. Have you checked our website?
I have checked your website, and I have not found that. I got the total number of voters, I got the total number of city voters and county voters, but I didn't get the total registered voters.
You want for the city?
Yeah. in total registered too.
And that's just for the city too?
Yeah.